conspiracies, lost treasure lore, historical events, the paranormal, mysteries, and world topics. These are topics that have always intrigued my interest, and I love digging, looking for facts, possible new clues, or information. I could sit and watch shows and listen to podcasts on these topics for hours. Let's dig into these ourselves, uncover truths and theories to some of the world's questions. Together, let's search for answers. You've entered Searching for Answers with Ryan. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first episode of my new show, Searching for Answers with Ryan. Now, my whole purpose of this particular type of show is to talk about conspiracy theories, to talk about, different historical events, kind of look for answers in things. I have all kinds of great ideas lined up for this. I have some really interesting people from some of my favorite shows, on History Channel, National Geographic and all that have agreed to come and interview with me for my new show. And so hopefully that's going to be a lot of fun. But I've actually, this type of show where I talk about the conspiracy theories or I look into historical facts and we talk about, different things. This has always intrigued me. This has always been something that I can spend hours and hours and hours researching and looking at. And a lot of these stories that I'm going to be bringing to you over the next, few months, years, however long that I can keep viewership up, which obviously is the big factor. A lot of these things I've been reading and learning about for years and years. So, we are going to cover all kinds of different things, not just one specific type of event or, we're not going to get into politics. I'm done with that. I'm not going to even try with that. We're not going to talk about, what's going on in today's society. We're just going to broaden our minds and see if we can come up with new answers, maybe uncover some truths on some things. So I think it might be really interesting. So we are, for my first episode, we're going to enter a centuries-old conspiracy, okay? This one is called, Was Jesus Married? Now, before you, say, you know what, that's it, I'm not going to listen to this, give me some time, okay? Give me some time, okay? Was it possible that someone so divine that lived could have been married and had children, okay? I think it is very possible, and I have some information for you that I want to share with you. But again, I want you to have an open mind. But let me start by saying I'm not trying to change any of your religious beliefs. I'm not trying to prove that your religion is wrong. Okay, I'm just, again, trying to open up the possibility that Jesus could have been married and that there is actually some proof out there. Even in the King James version of the Bible, there is proof that it's possible that he could have. So before you shut me out, give it a listen, see what you think. And again, not all my shows are all going to be about like religious stuff. We're going to break it down to all kinds of things. It could be science. It could be historical events, historical figures, and I think this being Jesus is the most historical figure of all time, okay? I am a Christian. I believe in God the Father. He's the maker of heaven and earth, and Jesus Christ, his only Son, who died for our sins to give us everlasting life in heaven. I believe that once my mission here on earth is done, I will join God in heaven along with my family that has passed on before me. So I am Christian. I was raised Baptist. I have read and researched lots of other forms of religion so that I can understand them better because I'm always interested in learning. And the more I feel I understand about religion, the closer I really am going to be, to understanding God and, what my purpose in this life is. There are many conspiracies about the Bible, many, and the writings of the Bible. One that's always had my attention is there's more proof that he may have been married that he wasn't married. Okay, and this is coming from the Bible, and you can research it if you want, check it out. But there's just a lot of facts. And it's not just theories. It's not, somebody just guessing, And a lot of times, we do know that the Bible is basically what you take out of it, what you transcribe it to be, what you think they're trying to say, And, this is coming from scholars, years of research. I've done a lot of research on this actually, and this might just be part 1 of 2, because I want to make sure that I can help broaden people's minds, not necessarily try to shut things down or say, you have to believe this. This isn't right. That's not me. Okay. So here's what we know. Okay. We know that Jesus was born to the Virgin Mary, and Joseph is the father that God chose for him. We know that. The whole story about, Christmas, Jesus was born, Bethlehem, all that, the wise men. We know that story. That's a great story. I love that story. But then it just so happens that there's very little that we know about his life from birth to about 12 years old. We really know nothing, because it's almost like he was off the grid for a while, I guess you could say. And about 12 years old is when it says he was with his parents in Jerusalem, and his parents couldn't find him. He was found a few days later at the temple reading with scholars. Then he goes off the grid again until about 30 years old, when he starts his missionary work. And that's when the Jesus movement started. So where is the missing details of his life? Birth to 12. And then from 12 to 30. Was this something that was omitted, deliberately left out? Back with Pope Constantine, he's the one that decided which section of the books or gospels are going to be put into the Bible itself, the one true Bible. And that was when he got the group of Nicaea together, and they actually worked on this together. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, but we're still at the very beginning of this. So after age 12, there's no mention of his father Joseph. Okay, now we know that it's possible, back in that day, men and women did not live to be old like we are today. You were considered a man at 13 years old back in those days and under Jewish law. Did he die right after Jesus was 12? And did Jesus need to take the role of supporting his mother, his brothers and sisters, which there is proof that he had siblings? So we need to, try to find out where that might be. In the Bible, nowhere does it say or lead us to believe that Jesus was celibate. Nowhere in the Bible did it mention or lead us to believe that he was unmarried. Okay, now had Jesus been celibate, Paul, one of his disciples, certainly would have invoked him as an example when arguing for celibacy, but he doesn't. Never once does Paul argue that Christians should be celibate. Paul actually rarely invoked Jesus as a moral example for any of his teachings. Now, during the time of Jesus, it was acceptable in Jewish law for a boy turning 13 to be considered a man, and it was acceptable for him to marry at that age. Now, in the Bible, 81 times it mentions Jesus as a man. So since he is a man, he most likely will have the same desires as any of us other men do. He would want to eat, drink, sleep, work, rest, marry, have kids. Men have desires. I would assume that he would have had desires such as an average man would. Now, Jesus is also called rabbi by his followers. Rabbis, under Jewish law back then, were allowed to marry and have children. And according to ancient Jewish law, a man cannot become a teacher or a priest until he is married. Okay, now I'm going to mention something later on about that. So, pay attention to that. You remember that part. Now, Paul was one of his first disciples to actually write about him. Okay, at no time does Paul mention that Jesus was celibate or argue that Christians shouldn't be celibate because Jesus was. Not one time in the Bible does it mention that. And I believe that if he was in fact unmarried, it would have been mentioned somewhere in the Gospels. There are very few examples of celibate Jewish men, especially religious leaders, that we've ever read about. It was unheard of for a female that was not married to a male to wash their dead body for preparation for burial, especially blood and sweat from private parts, which, again, I will get to cover a little bit later on. Now, we do know Jesus was in favor of marriage. It is said, he stated, "For man shall cleave to his wife, and they shall be one of flesh." And Jesus condemned divorce, but did not advocate celibacy. It is also said that Peter, which is also known as Simon, was married and he had children. Now, most of us know that with missionary missions, they're usually a family matter and include a husband and wife. Jesus had Mary by his side, so it makes sense that he could possibly have been married. Many of his followers were women. Some of them were quite wealthy, and others who were a little more than beggars, all of whom showered him with love and attention. Who could have been his wife? I believe this to be the one, Mary Magdalene. Before you close your mind, again, let me share you some facts. Okay, remember, keep an open mind. Okay, there is a Mary that is first mentioned among a group of women from Galilee who offer financial support to Jesus. Does she come from a prominent family with money? There's no mention of this Mary being married. According to Jewish law at that time, women could not inherit money or land. They were maintained by family, so we can assume that she wasn't married before and considered a widow at this point. Now, Galilee is a fishing town. Maybe she owned a fishing business. There's no answer to this and to where the money from the women came from. So who was Mary Magdalene? Where did she really come from? What was her role in the Jesus movement? The New Testament does not clearly state exactly where Jesus met Mary. She is mentioned only 12 times in the Gospels. Now, we do know that the Gospels were written about 30 to 70 years after Jesus' death. Many have been altered through the years. It is known that the book of John has 450, that's 450, documented changes since it was originally written. Most of them were minor changes. Some were names of a woman named Mary, later changed to Martha in regards to Lazarus and his sisters. Now, many scholars say that Lazarus, the man Jesus rose from the dead, and his family were close to Jesus when he was growing up. Lazarus is also a very loved disciple of Jesus. He's believed to have a sister named Mary, and believe this Mary to be the one, Mary Magdalene. Now, it's quite common that back in those times, people that were wed to cousins, not necessarily first cousins, second, third, fourth cousins kind of thing, or close family friends. Could this actually be the Mary Magdalene that we hear of in the Bible? There's a lot of secrecy with this. And, she's very mysterious in a way. Now, it's said that Mary, having the last name Magdalene, meaning she comes from Magdala, that's a city on the southwest coast of the Sea of Galilee. So it's not far from Galilee where Jesus is said to have grown up. There are several women that are mentioned in the Gospels that many refer to as Mary Magdalene. Okay. Now, I'm not saying this is, I'm not saying it isn't, because there's really no knowing if it really is or is not. there's a mention of a woman that cried at Jesus' feet, washing his feet with her tears and drying them with her hair. The woman is never named. Another mention of a woman that comes in and washes and anoints Jesus' feet with expensive oils of perfumes, thus upsetting Paul. And Jesus says to him, she does what no one has done. This woman is also never named. Another woman that Jesus saves from being stoned after committing adultery. That woman is also never named. A woman was saved by Jesus when he cast out 7 demons from her. This woman is stated in the New Testament that her name is Mary. Now, not specifically Mary Magdalene. And this part can be found in the Gospel of Luke. Okay, the first mention of Mary Magdalene is shortly after these events. So many refer to her, the women that were in those stories, as Mary Magdalene. What we do know from the Gospels is that she was devoted to Jesus and she was a follower. She was there when he died on the cross. She showed she was willing to go unto death with Jesus, especially when his disciples did not follow. This says a lot of her and her closeness to Jesus. She cleaned his lifeless body and helped place him in his tomb. She is the first person he reveals himself upon his resurrection, and she was alone. Then after delivering the news of the resurrection to Jesus' followers, she disappears from the Bible. Now, did she flee to safeguard the bloodline of Jesus? Was she pregnant? Was she that important that she had to go into hiding so that she herself would not be crucified? It's clear she is a very important person, or she would have never been mentioned in the Bible in any way, because back then, women were not considered important, and not many women are mentioned in the Bible at all, unless they have major importance. Now, in 1945, near Nag Hammadi, hopefully I said that right, this is in Egypt, there was a discovery that opened up a whole new light to Mary and who she was or could potentially be. And it showed to be different than the 2,000 years of words in the Bible that have already been spoken to us. A group of local farmers were digging for fertilizer when they uncovered 13 earthenware jars that had been buried for over 1,500 years. Inside, those jars contained 12 leather-bound books inside. Now, the books that were inside are said to be Gospels accredited to several disciples that were left out of the New Testament. In these books is said to be found the Gospel of Mary, the only gospel contributed by a woman, and is said to have been written in the 2nd century AD. In these books, which have now been deemed the Gnostic Gospels, is the book of Philip, which gives us a new light on Mary. But due to the age of the manuscript, some of the pages have parts that have been corroded away, therefore leaving some gaps or holes in the manuscript. But you can word it several different ways. The way it is written, a lot of people can have their own ideals of what it says. But this is what they've deciphered it to say, in including the gaps. So it says, then the companion of, and there's a gap, Mary Magdalene, another gap, her more than, another gap, the disciples, gap, kiss her, gap, on her gap. Now, that could be taken or translated into many different ways. Now, scholars, after reading the remaining gospel and some of the other books that were found in the Gnostic Gospels, have come to the conclusion that it was worded such as, the companion of Jesus, Mary Magdalene, loved her more than the disciples, always kisses her on the mouth. Now, we also remember the Da Vinci Code, the movie that came out. They mention it in there, but these words and the way a lot of the scholars have written it actually came before that movie came out. So we know that those lines did not come out because of the movie. But scholars, they interpret what they read and how, they are, I guess you could say, thinking what was being said at that time. Now, there are different other versions of what the scholar said. It said she kissed her on her head, kissed her on her cheek. It's interesting to see what the other scholars say. But the one that I just read you, the companion of Jesus, Mary Magdalene, loved her more than the disciples, always kiss her on her mouth, is the one that comes out more from scholars. Now, it's also said in this Gospel of Philip that she understood the teachings of Jesus more than the other disciples, or that she understood them in a different way than the other disciples did. It's also said that she helped with the teachings when Jesus was not available. Now, we know that there was some animosity, and it's mentioned in the Bibles, with some of the disciples and her. And could it be because she was so close to Jesus? It's quite possible. In the New Testament, it is clear the men take the leading role and women didn't matter much. The lost or Gnostic Gospels are said to put Mary at the very center of the Jesus movement. The Gospels are also said to have an alternative view of Christianity. Many people don't know about the Gnostic Gospels or Gnosticism. Now, Gnosticism is a religion that in many ways is similar to Christianity and has a lot of Christian elements in it. But it's said with Gnosticism that salvation came not by only having faith, but also by having knowledge. It also claims in the Gnostic Gospels that Mary and Peter had frequent heated arguments. Peter is the disciple that tradition says became the first Pope of Rome. The Gospel of Thomas in the New Testament, Thomas talks of the tension between Mary and Peter. Near the end of the Gospel of Thomas, it tells of an argument or a little dispute that unfolded when Peter let his resentment of Mary known by saying to Jesus, "Tell Mary to leave us. She is a woman unworthy of life, spiritual life." So with Gnosticism and Christianity, it's said that Orthodox Christian views come from Peter, and Gnostic Christian views come from Mary. Now, in the first 300 years or so after Jesus' death, there are more than 80 different texts in existence that spoke about his life and teachings. By the 4th century, the church had settled on a list of 27 approved texts, including the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, which would be included in the New Testament. All others, including the Gospel of Mary, that didn't fit the doctrine of the Orthodox Church, were deemed heretical and never to be read or copied again. All of this was decided in 325 AD when Constantine the Great called the First Council of Nicaea, composed of 300 different religious leaders from around their areas. Now, 3 centuries after Jesus lived, this council was given the task of separating divinely inspired writings from those of questionable origin. Many of the books not used were burned to keep them from getting into the hands of the public, so we would never know what those books were. This is Constantine's way of trying to unite the church and to give the church more power. The only information that survived about Mary Magdalene was contained in a few short lines of the New Testament. She has been reinvented time and time again, 12 times, that can be followed by documentation alone. How much was removed from the approved Gospels is really unknown. Pope Gregory the Great in the 6th century is the one that originally stated during a Mass, Mary Magdalene is a sinful woman who Jesus saved. And since that time, that day that he mentioned that is when Christians have referred to her as the prostitute. It is said that Mary, the mother of Jesus, and Mary Magdalene were not at the Last Supper. Jesus knew he was going to be betrayed, and he knew it could get violent or dangerous. So did he keep them away purposely for safekeeping? Because there's a lot more to Mary Magdalene that is mentioned throughout the Bible. But Mary, the mother of Jesus, and Mary Magdalene are at the crucifixion of Jesus. And many of his followers were not there. So it says a lot for Mary Magdalene to be with Jesus at this moment. And, my interpretation, maybe this is where the vow in marriage, this says, till death do us part, comes into play. Now, Mary Magdalene it states in the Bible, she helped prepare his body for burial. Then and now, no woman would touch the naked body of a dead rabbi unless she was family. Jesus was whipped, beaten, and crucified. And I honestly believe that no woman would touch the blood, the sweat, the private parts of a dead body, especially a rabbi, unless she was his wife or mother. But it does not say Mary, his mother, was there for preparing the body for burial. It just states Mary Magdalene. Now, let's look at the Last Supper picture. Now, this is where the conspiracies kind of get all weirded. And again, Da Vinci Code is the one that kind of brought this to light. But at the same time, this has been a conspiracy for a lot longer than that. Okay, so let's look at the picture for the Last Supper. Okay, many believe that Mary is disguised as John, who sits to the right of Jesus. Now, according to scholars, when Jesus was near his end, John could have only been 10 years old. So clearly it could not have been John in this picture. And also the person that is said to be John, is very feminine looking, very ladylike. Now, there are 12 people with Jesus, and it's never officially been figured out exactly who is who, but you would assume that it is the 12 disciples. Now, there is one mention in the Bible of Jesus and a wedding. Okay, John 2, 1 through 11. And the third day, there was a marriage in Cana of Galilee. And the mother of Jesus was there, and both Jesus was called and his disciples to the marriage. And when they wanted wine, the mother of Jesus saith to them, they have no more wine. And then Jesus replies, woman, why do you involve me? My hour has not come yet. His mother said to the servants, do whatever he tells you. Nearby stood 6 stone water jars. Jesus said to the servants, fill the jars with water. So they filled them to the brim. He then told them to draw some out and take it to the head waiter. So they took it. And when the head waiter tasted the water, it was turned into wine. This is the first of the signs that revealed his glory when the water became wine. Now, whose wedding was this? It does not say anywhere in that scripture whose wedding it was. Why would Mary, the mother of Jesus, be so demanding if it was not a wedding of importance? Possibly this could be Jesus's wedding. It does not say, that it's not his, and it does not say that it is his. It clearly does not define whose wedding it is. Now, we do know that the wedding was in Galilee, where it is said in his older years Jesus lived, so he did not have to travel far for the wedding. He already had disciples, but not already had begun his ministry yet until this marriage. And it even says on the third day he was called. Now, the third day is also very important. It's significant. He raised from the dead on the third day. So the third day is important. But again, this wedding, could it have been his wedding? And this is actually what started the Jesus movement. So did he get married and then start his missionary work? It could very well be possible. I mean, I don't think that it would be a bad thing at this point. I really don't. Now, how about this one? In the book of John, it says, now when he's being crucified, okay? Now there stood by the cross of Jesus, his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Cleophas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus therefore saw his mother and the disciples standing by, whom he loved, he saith unto his mother, Woman, behold thy son. Then said to the disciple, Behold thy mother. And from that hour, that disciple took her unto his own home. Now, you might be able to argue that Mary may have been his wife, Lazarus, possibly his brother-in-law, which could be because they were so close and he was one of his favorite disciples. Could Lazarus be the disciple that was standing there with him? It does not really clarify exactly who that disciple was. Now, it does talk about son. Now, there's a lot of theory that James, which is Jesus' younger brother, might be that son. I'm not sure. But, there's just a lot of different theories about who it really could be, at that time. And again, we are, a lot of these books were written many, many years after his death, and they were interpreted by the person writing on what the person that was actually giving them the information was saying. So, it's interesting. Could he have been married? Possibly. Could he not have been married? Possibly. There's a lot of what ifs on that. Now, in closing, time to kind of wrap it up a little bit. Would it really have been so bad that if he was married? Could he have been less divine if he was married? I honestly, this is my theory, okay? I think it would make him more divine and to understand the human immortal life more and to give more meaning to him giving his life to save our sins. It would also give him more meaning to understand true love and to make his purpose even greater. Why would it be so bad that he enjoyed life? Why would it have been so bad if he was able to have loved and to have been loved? Would it have been so bad if he actually had children? And given his age at 30, he most likely could have had children if you go by Jewish, laws and the way the Jewish lived their lives in those days. I see this. If he would have had his own children too, even more reason for him to die, to protect them and to save their sins. Well, that's it on that one. I enjoyed that one. I hope you enjoyed listening to it, and it maybe gave you a little bit of a broader, thought, or maybe even, kind of expanded your mind a little bit about that. I appreciate you listening to Searching for Answers with Ryan. I look forward to bringing you new stories, and I actually have some exciting stuff in the works, including interviews from some of my favorite TV personalities, from some of my favorite historical and treasure shows that you could find on Discovery, History Channel, Travel Channel, and such. So again, thank you very much for listening, and I hope everybody stays safe. Have a good one.